She's gone a month, the police said of Mom. My emails proved otherwise. He visited her last, I shouted. Diary's truth, he buried her alive. I couldn't fathom how this tragedy had befallen my mother. After being away for quite a while, I came back to the house where I grew up, only to discover her remains buried in the yard. The police concluded that she had passed away over a month prior. But I struggled to accept this because I'd communicated with her just the day before. Then, who had I been emailing? Amidst the bewilderment, I came across my mother's diary. As I discovered the awful truth contained within, I was overcome with fear and rage. I'd only ever seen my father's image in pictures. Your father died in an accident when you were just a baby, my mother would always tell me during my childhood. Growing up with only one parent, my mother worked so hard to pay for my college education. She was quiet but resilient and compassionate, the person I looked up to and the one I relied on emotionally. My husband, Pete, understood this and admired her, always treating her with respect. Pete and I met in college, and we tied the knot when I was 26. We started our own lives approximately 2 hours away from my childhood home. Sadly, my mother, who had pushed herself for years, started getting sick frequently and regularly needed to take time off from work. Mom, why don't you move in with us? It would give me peace of mind. My husband agreed. That's so sweet, but I prefer living by myself. I'm more at ease that way, she responded, giving me a somewhat guilty look, gently declining my invitation. I definitely understood how she felt, yet, as her child, I couldn't help but be concerned for her. Therefore, I proposed that we start talking almost every day. Mom wasn't exactly fluent with technology, and even found emails tricky, so our conversations always took place over the phone. Just listening to her voice each day was reassuring, since I lived so far away. Certainly, I longed to see her face on occasion, but because of my demanding work commitments, I was only able to visit about once every 4 weeks. To compensate, my husband would offer his assistance when he was able. If you can't get there, I will go and check on her, he'd say. Don't fret. Thank you so much, that really is a big help. Your mother is important family to me as well. With these words, he would visit her now and then, without expressing any annoyance. While my husband was sweet, he had a slight issue with handling money wisely, and it concerned me. He would buy things without checking how much they cost or even talking it over with me first. We had fought about this frequently, but his spending didn't get any better, and as a result, I had to limit the money he could use. But one day, I was stunned when I examined the credit card bill. Why is the amount so high? It's more than $1,000. Oh, Pete mumbled, looking down. This totally cancels out the point of giving you a set amount of money. What did you spend it on? Well, the other day when I went out with my buddies for some drinks, I ended up paying for everyone. What? You can't afford to cover the bill for others? I snapped, my temper flaring without me meaning to. I'm really sorry, it won't happen again, he said. I thought my husband was thinking about what he'd done, and he pledged he wouldn't be careless with money anymore, so I chose to let it go. Yet his word was worthless because he broke it not even a month later. This time he dipped into our shared account without even telling me. He told me I really needed that money, and that just made it even worse. How could you use our savings like that? He said he was sorry and that he would put it back when he got paid. Though he said he was sorry, I wasn't convinced he truly felt bad. This was really making me angry. I'd had enough, and I told him that I would divorce him if it happened again. When those words came out in the middle of my anger, my husband completely freaked out. He said, "No, don't do that." He added that he would change and be more responsible starting from then on. He repeated his apologies over and over, almost to the point of crying. He swore there wouldn't be another time. I told him that I hadn't forgiven him yet. It all depended on how he behaved going forward. I determined this would be the final time I'd overlook things, and I made that perfectly clear. I had a feeling he'd probably mess up again soon, but if he did, I'd leave him without a second thought. From then on, he began to get my opinion on everything, even little purchases. Not only that, but he also helped more with chores around the house and started paying even more attention to my mom, acting in a very devoted way. Since then, money wasn't an issue and we were living in harmony. But roughly 4 years after we got married, something bizarre came up with my mother. I came down with a cold and lost my voice, so I told her to communicate by email for a while. I got an email from her. What? I was really taken aback by this sudden shift in her, because she had never been able to master email, even after all my efforts to show her how. The content of the emails made me feel pretty anxious, though. Are you doing okay? Would you like me to come over right now? I'm not running a fever, and I don't want to risk giving you a cold, so there's no need for you to come. The responses came quicker than I would have thought possible from my mom, who struggles with technology, which made me even more unsettled. It just felt wrong somehow. I really wanted to rush over to her place immediately, but I was swamped at work and couldn't squeeze in the time. Maybe I should send him to check on her instead, my husband offered. Would you be willing to do that? I hate to always be asking for your help, but that would be incredibly helpful. I expressed my gratitude to my husband and asked him to go. The day after, he went to see my mom. When I got home from work, he told me her throat seemed to be in a bad way, but she was otherwise okay. This calmed me down a bit. I hadn't seen her myself, though. I hadn't been there to see her in a while myself, so I figured I'd go see her as soon as my work slowed down. Several weeks went by, and as the heat of summer began to fade, there was a clear sense of autumn in the air, especially during the mornings and evenings. I was still just talking to my mom through email, which made me feel a bit isolated. My job had finally calmed down, and out of the blue I got an afternoon off, so I decided to go visit my mother after quite a long time. I'll shock her by just showing up without giving her any warning, I thought. I got to her place and pushed the doorbell, but nobody answered. It felt like nobody was there, so I figured she might be out, and I let myself in with my extra key, figuring I'd just hang around until she got back. The house felt kind of stale, like it hadn't been aired out in ages, so I opened all the windows. Then I looked out at her garden and I saw that something was off with her vegetable patch, the thing she was really into. Wait, what? Why was only that specific area messed up? I went out to the garden to get a closer look, and I could see where someone had been digging in a single spot. My curiosity getting the better of me, I began to dig there myself. To my utter shock, I unearthed a skeleton. Oh no, I let out a scream and just crumpled to the ground, frozen in terror. My body was shaking, and I quickly called the police on my cell phone. While the police were on their way, I, terrified, took another look at the bones and saw something familiar that had been buried alongside them. It was the necklace I'd given my mom for Mother's Day. No, why would this be here? Even though I didn't want to accept it, the absolute worst possible thought raced through my head. Could this be Mom? Dealing with this unthinkable truth, it felt like my whole body was sinking into a really deep and awful swamp. After about 10 minutes, the police finally showed up and started their investigation of the garden. Allison, are you all right? My husband, who I'd contacted, arrived too, and we both had to answer questions about what had happened. We explained that my husband had been the last person to see my mother. I explained to them that my spouse was the last person to see her, and that I'd been corresponding via email with her right up until the day before. This news seemed to confuse the police officers. Based on how the bones looked, she'd been deceased for well over a month. Besides, they couldn't locate my mother's cell phone anywhere. Yet I was exchanging emails with my mom. She was even thoughtful about my workload. Allison, stop. It's all right. I was so stunned I couldn't even process what was going on. I could only weep. From that point on, my husband handled everything for my mother's funeral, while I felt like I was living in a haze. Before I realized it, the funeral had come and gone. I figured I should sort through my mother's belongings, so I began going to her house daily. As I was going through her dresser, I came across a box that was the size of a piece of paper. How I remembered these things. It held drawings I had made of her as a child, as well as letters and gifts, all carefully looked after. I was moved that she had kept these things, and as I lifted everything in the box to inspect other items, I spotted a fairly new notebook at the very bottom. It seemed to be my mother's diary. I wanted to find out more about her recent life, so I cautiously started to read it, only to discover something I couldn't believe was there. What the heck? That just couldn't be right. Finding out this terrifying truth, I felt an anger explode within me. It was a rage like nothing else I've ever felt. I will never let this go. I was resolved to find and confront the person who had caused my mother so much suffering, and I started planning my retaliation. 2 days later, when both my spouse and I had a day away from our jobs, he took me out for a stroll. "I'm just thankful you're up for getting some outside time," he said. "Yeah, I guess so," I replied. My husband was pleased that we were going out together since I had been feeling down about my mother for quite some time. "I feel a little worn out. Should we get some tea?" We chose to go into a cafe close by. The cafes inside held a few business guys and clusters of middle-aged women sprinkled around. My husband picked a table by the window and we sat opposite each other. "What are you in the mood to drink? I think I'll order a float." His eyes lit up as he picked from the menu like a kid. "Hey, there's something I've been wanting to discuss." "Can I tell you?" I asked him. "What's on your mind?" "What's wrong?" he asked, making eye contact with me. "Well, I've been pondering something about my mother. How can I have been emailing her the day before they found her when she had been gone for more than a month? Oh, well, maybe the murderer was impersonating her and responding to put off the discovery." He shared his hypothesis in all seriousness. Of course, that was the first thing that crossed my mind too, but there were multiple things that didn't quite fit. But isn't it weird that one of the emails mentioned wanting to go back to that spa we all loved going to? Only the three of us knew about that spa trip, right? "Yeah, you're right." He questioned if it could just be a random occurrence. As I mumbled my thoughts, he acknowledged them with a nod while enjoying his ice cream drink. Nevertheless, he appeared a little uneasy. Check this out, I announced, pulling a paper from my bag and putting it on the table for him to see. It turns out Mom was ill. I discovered this while going through her belongings. It was a medical report. I was unaware of it until then, but my mother was dealing with a condition that needed medical attention. Were you aware of this? I inquired. No, I wasn't, he responded. I understood. When I contacted the hospital to verify, they told me my mother ceased attending her appointments at a certain time. It looked like she even stopped her treatment before it was completed. My husband folded his arms, seeming lost in thought. Perhaps she had her motivations, he offered. I then guessed. Perhaps she couldn't afford the expense of the treatment. Perhaps, I muttered. But there's no good in dwelling on that now, is there? His demeanor appeared troubled, and he started to get increasingly agitated. I fixed my gaze on him. You borrowed money from my mother, didn't you? Certainly not. He asked, why would I? Even though he said otherwise, he was obviously in a state of panic. I need you to tell the truth, I demanded. The reality is that you took over $20,000 from my mother, didn't you? As I kept pushing him, my husband, whether angry or defensive, jumped to his feet and banged on the table. How can you accuse me? He asked. You're crazy to say something like that without any proof. Maybe you're just a little bit out of it yourself. The harshness in my husband's tone immediately made everyone in the coffee shop look our way. Realizing he'd caused a scene, he said he was sorry and then sat down, talking more quietly. The other people in the cafe quickly averted their eyes, yet I could tell they were curious about what we were saying and were sneaking peeks while trying to listen in. I have proof, I told him. To his astonishment, I put a notebook on the table in front of him. It was my mom's diary, which I'd discovered when I was tidying up her place. What's that supposed to signify? He asked with a challenging tone, as if he expected trouble. I flipped the page. I turned the page and read what my mother had penned. The diary described how Pete had been intimidating my mom and taking money from her, along with the specific sums. And furthermore, you threatened to harm me and destroy my life if she didn't give you money. That's appalling. Apparently, when my mom said she couldn't lend any more money because of her medical costs, my husband had told her, what's the purpose of living so long? It's just a waste of money. He had, in addition, made her pick between her own health and her daughter, making her abandon treatment while continuously asking for more cash. All of this was recorded in the notebook. Tell me what this means immediately. I'm completely unaware of any of that, he stated. Besides, a diary like this isn't really proof of anything, is it? My husband grew defensive, leaning back in his seat, acting like he knew he was right. You're correct. This by itself may not be enough to be considered evidence. Maybe it's all just my mom's imagination. I thought I knew it. You're a smart lady, I can see that, he said as he laughed, as if he was making fun of me. All right, what about this? I recorded a video on my phone and showed it to my spouse. Pete, who had been smiling easily until now, was utterly speechless. How do you explain this? Don't just sit there staring. Tell me something. The video was from a camera hidden in my mom's living room. My mother's diary said, Pete's demands are becoming more and more intense and I'm scared. She wrote, if I can get video evidence, I'll tell my daughter everything. It turns out my mom, who isn't good with tech, bought a camera and had a store set it up for her. The footage showed them fighting over money, and then in the middle of it, my husband got angry and raised his hand at her, causing her to fall. Then he freaked out and moved her body into the garden. After he returned to the living room by himself, he took all the money from her purse, and he also took her phone before running away. The video just showed an empty room after that. My husband, Pete, was the one who did it. It's so surprising to me that you would do this. There's no way out for you now, I said, with fury and disgust rising up from deep inside me as I looked at him. But instead of backing down, he began yelling, that wretched old woman. Why did she have to leave this kind of thing behind? What made you take money from my mom? Naturally, it's because I owe money. He needed to pay off his debts. My spouse was completely bold about it, owning up to it without a trace of regret. It seems his terrible financial habits hadn't changed a bit. He couldn't stop overspending, racking up debt as a result. When I got married, I was expected to pitch in for our living expenses, but I also had my own debts to handle. I was struggling as well. This was also the reason why he dipped into our shared savings without my approval. He was struggling, as you know, and that's why he hadn't asked for my permission. You acted like you were responsible in front of me, yet behind my back you were doing such things. Well, I was forced to play the role of a good husband, or you'd said you'd divorce me. If that actually happened, I wouldn't be able to get money from your mom, right? That old woman was surprisingly good at saving money. Just because someone is a single parent doesn't mean they're broke, you know. When my husband began visiting my mother on my behalf, he'd secretly glanced at her bank book, which just happened to be sitting there. My mom wasn't one to live extravagantly, so she likely had been saving little by little from her modest income for a rainy day. My husband must have smirked to himself when he saw the amount, thinking, I can use this. Initially, she'd hand over the cash without question, but beginning with the next instance, she began to drag her feet, citing the expenses of her therapy. So you're using me like a human barrier to manipulate her, huh? How low is that? Isn't it just heartwarming to hear? Claiming her daughter's well-being is paramount. Is this the epitome of parental affection? A smirk spread across his face, but I found it completely repulsive. My spouse possibly feels no remorse whatsoever. Nevertheless, you shouldn't have taken her life. Oh, it was simply a mistake. I didn't actually plan for that. But when I struck her a little too forcefully, she collapsed and stopped breathing. I figured it would be a problem if she decomposed inside the home, so I went to the trouble of hiding her away. I buried her in the earth. His words just poured out of him. I began to question if he had any sense of empathy left in him. Considering how my own mother must feel, I couldn't stop the tears from streaming down my face. Still, I couldn't give up here. To erase my mother's unhappiness, I absolutely had to expose the truth and hand him over to the authorities. So you were the one pretending to be my mom in those messages. Yes, that's correct. I figured it was a thoughtful gesture on my part, you know. I thought you'd appreciate feeling like you had more time with your mom. I don't need that kind of consideration at all. He discarded my mother's phone after I contacted him about trying to find her. There was no reason to show any restraint toward this individual anymore. I am going to report this to the police right now. With all the proof collected, there's no doubt your deeds will result in a conviction. I find myself pondering how long he will be incarcerated. Are you being serious? I swear I never planned on taking her life. It was just a tragic event that unfolded unexpectedly. If you hadn't delayed calling for medical help, my mother could still be alive. Your actions are really serious. You should have acted differently. Hold on a second. Please don't call the authorities. We are married, aren't we? My husband changed his story abruptly and began to beg me. Did he seriously believe I would cover for him now? After what you did to my beloved mother, we're no longer married. We're getting a divorce. I announced our divorce and I pushed my husband away. He then slammed the table again and stood up. Don't you dare mess with me, you terrible woman. Pete appeared to forget we were in public and yelled at me loudly, but it stopped quickly when he lunged at me. Several people in the cafe held him back. Stop it. Release me. Allison, do something about these people. He was begging me for help, crying loudly. Spend your life trying to fix the damage you have done. As I said that, I heard police sirens drawing closer. It seemed the cafe staff had contacted them and they took Pete away. Our divorce was legally finalized, and through my attorney I sought $30,000 in compensation. My husband was detained because of what he did. He committed wicked deeds, and he will probably be in prison for a long time. I sometimes ponder if I've somehow eased some of the sorrows my mom held. The other day, I was thinking about this as I gazed up at the cloudless heavens. From this point onward, I'm absolutely committed to conducting myself in a manner that would bring her pride, wherever she may be.